So in today's video, we are going to review the VanEck Semiconductor ETF SMH. SMH is one of my favorite ETFs on the market, and I'm very excited to go over this with you guys today. Full disclosure, SMH is approximately 10% of my ETF portfolio, and if you want to see my whole portfolio, follow me on Blossom Social, where you can follow me and track my live ETF portfolio. Now let's get started. So here we are on the VanEck official issuer website. Right here we have SMH VanEck Semiconductor ETF pulled up. Let's take a look at the fund description. So right here, the VanEck Semiconductor ETF, SMH, it seeks to replicate as closely as possible to the performance of the MVIS US listed Semiconductor 25 Index. So let's jump over to the index website so you can understand this fund completely. So here what I have pulled up is the MVIS MV Index Solutions corporate presentation. So going down here on page 4, it shows that MVIS, the MV Index Solutions, is a VanEck company that develops, manages, and licenses benchmarks since 2011. Now here we are at the MVIS official website, going on to the MVIS US listed Semiconductor 25 Index. So once again, this index tracks the performance of the 25 largest and most liquid US exchange listed companies within the semiconductor industry. Over here we have size and liquidity requirements. The stocks involved need to meet size and liquidity requirements listed here. The market cap needs to be above $150 million. The 3-month average daily trading volume of at least $1 million US, and then at least 250,000 shares traded per month over the last 6 months. Second row down, it also needs to meet some business and revenue requirements. So over here, companies must generate at least 50% of revenue from semiconductors. And then a little bit more into the index, weighting is capped at 20%, and then the index gets rebalanced 2 times a year, March and September. Now let's take a deeper dive at the components of the SMH ETF. Here we can take a look at the top 10 current holdings with a massive tilt towards Nvidia for obvious reasons. Nvidia is the leader in AI computing, with roughly 40% of their business coming from giants like Google, Meta, and Amazon, self-driving cars and Tesla, and also crypto mining. Up next here we have Taiwan Semiconductors. TSMC manufactures more than 90% of the world's next generation logic chips. They also manufacture chips for PCs, smartphones, and manufacture chips for Apple, Qualcomm, AMD, and for most of this list. And third, we have Broadcom, which Broadcom designs, develops, manufactures, and supplies semiconductors and infrastructure software products for data centers, networking, broadband, and more. And then here we also have some of the other biggest semiconductor brands, such as Texas Instruments. We have Qualcomm, ASML, Applied Materials, Micron, and some other popular semiconductor names. Now let's do a quick overview on distributions and expenses for SMH. Let's take a look at the dividends and expenses for the SMH ETF. So based on Fidelity here, TTM in parentheses stands for the trailing 12 months. So this is the distribution yield on the trailing 12 months. So 0.49%, which isn't too bad considering that semiconductors are a mega growth industry and not necessarily looking for value or companies with a high dividend. Switching over to the VanEck issuer website, we can see here the distribution history. It looks like they distribute dividends once a year. And then I'll scroll back to the top on the VanEck website. You can see here the total expense ratio is 0.35%, which may seem high compared to if you're trying to compare it to the major indices like a S&P 500 or NASDAQ. But this is tied for the industry's lowest expense ratio, which I will go to in further detail in a bit when comparing other semiconductor ETFs to each other. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the 5-year and 10-year chart for SMH. So looking back at the 5-year and 10-year chart of the SMH ETF, this chart and ETF has done absolutely phenomenal. Flipping over to TradingView, which is one of my favorite charting websites, SMH has returned over 1,000% in the past 10 years. So who said that investing in ETFs are lame, huh? Switching back over to the VanEck issuer website, let's take a look at the growth of hypothetical $10,000 investment. So we'll take a look over a 10-year period. If you invested 10 years ago, it would start at $10,000 and finish at over $110,000. Switching to the 5-year view, a mere $10,000 would have grown to roughly $41,000. Looking at the average annual total returns for the SMH ETF, over here this ETF has produced roughly 25% annual returns since inception. And then next to the 10-year is roughly 26% annual returns. And then year over year is up almost 74%, which is absolutely insane for an ETF. Let's flip back over to the Fidelity website analyzing SMH, and let's take a look at the Morningstar ratings for this ETF. So right here, SMH, Morningstar is rated at 5 stars. The rating is a quantitative assessment of a fund's past performance that accounts for both risk and return, with funds earning between 1 and 5 stars. Now let's take a look at some of the portfolio fundamentals. So we're back on Fidelity's website. Let's go over portfolio fundamentals. Once again, we can see here the expense ratio, 0.35%. While it still may seem high compared to the major index ETFs, looking at the sector median of technology, it still beats that. So it's the top 88th percentile. So it's still very good, especially the amount of performance and growth you're getting in this industry. I'm willing to pay for that 0.35%. And then once again, looking at the dividend yield, the dividend is below average, but you're essentially trading that dividend for high growth once again. You're paying for that 25%, 27% annualized return a year. Net assets here, which is the AUM, assets under management, roughly $18 billion. That smashes the sector median of $100 million. It is the 99th percentile. SMH is the third largest tech ETF out there, which is just below the XLK and VGT, which are just the ETF tech sector ETFs. And then let's quickly go over the PE ratio. Once again, the PE ratio is the stock price divided by the earnings per share, the EPS, and this is how much an investor pays for each dollar of earnings the companies make. So since semiconductors are super high growth, investors are willing to pay $34 to $35 per dollar the company makes, so it is not a huge surprise, since all these companies are majority growth companies, so they're willing to pay a higher dollar per earning. Take a look at Nvidia's current PE ratio. It is at 71, so it's pretty wild what investors are willing to pay for these companies. Lastly, let's compare SMH to some of the other best semiconductor ETFs on the market. And lastly, let's take a look at the other top semiconductor ETFs on the market. Here I'm using Track Insights. This is one of my favorite ETF websites to compare multiple ETFs at once. We are able to do up to 5 ETFs. Some of the other websites I use only allow you to do one-by-one comparisons, but this one allows you to do up to 5. So let's take a look at the 5-year performance of SMH, SOXX, XSD, and PSI. These are the other top 4 biggest semiconductor ETFs in the United States. As you see by the chart here and over here, SMH clearly dominates in the past performance with 308% compared to the next best SOXX at 237%, and then XSD and PSI not breaking 200%. Obviously, there's still fantastic returns for ETFs, but if you're looking for the best performance, SMH right here, 308%. Taking a look at the assets under management here, this is the amount of money that's invested in these ETFs. You can see that SMH and SOXX are clearly the dominant ones here, $18 billion, $12 billion, and then there's a steep drop off, $1.44 billion and $793 million. So if you're also looking for investor interest and ETFs that may be a little bit more liquid, you may want to look at the ones that are over here, SMH and SOXX. And then we're going to take a look at the expense ratio here. We can see that majority of them are 0.35. These 3 all tie. But then once it gets to the other semiconductors, ETFs like PSI, and then there are a couple other ones, there's a steep drop off. Right here we have 0.57%, and then there's even ones that are above 0.6%. So obviously if you're looking for the cheapest expense ratio, the big boys right here, SMH, SOXX, XSD. And then lastly here, we can compare all the holdings, the top 15 holdings for each company. So as you can see here, SMH, the reason why most likely that SMH has the best performance by far is because they are the heaviest weighted in Nvidia with roughly 24% compared to Nvidia, which is 10%. Over here, we have 4% over here. This one looks like it may be more of an equal weight or just a little bit more dispersed. And then Nvidia is not even the highest in this section. Another reason why I like SMH compared to the other ones is that they have a higher focus on Taiwan Semiconductor and ASML, which are the manufacturing semiconductor ETF companies. They're not even breaking the top 5 in any of these other ETFs. And then as well, comparing the weight of the top 15 holdings, SMH has a lot less companies. It's a little bit more concentrated. It is focusing more on the biggest and best semiconductor companies in that industry. So you may like that or you may not. But here you can see that the least amount of holdings are in SMH with 25. So after reviewing SMH once again, this is clearly one of my favorite ETFs on the market today. It provides a portfolio of diversification to one of the biggest and fastest growing industries in the market today. And having a high growth ETF like this compared to a single stock gives me a bit more peace of mind knowing that I do not have single stock exposure. Just keep in mind that having an industry focused ETF, you still are extremely concentrated into one specific area of the market. So what do you guys think of the SMH ETF? Give me a thumbs up, drop some comments in the video, and of course subscribe for more.